it'll be changed to some extent. And I'll probably be one of those, probably leading the way to help change it as best we can.
How much do you travel between Washington, D.C. and here?
Yeah. I come home almost every weekend. Now, you might say, well, that's 52 times a year, but it's really not. It's probably about 35 times a year, because when we come home, we don't meet usually during the month of August. So when I come home in August, I got 5 weekends that I'm not traveling, 4 weekends I'm not traveling. So I suppose I make about 35 trips a year, or, you know, you have 10 days of Christmas. Now, we didn't have 10 days of Christmas this year. For the first time in all the years I've been in Congress, I was in Washington between Christmas and New Year's. Mostly I'm in Iowa at the farm, you know. So you got those instances. So I think the answer to your question is about 35 times. But let me answer I don't know if this is the purpose of your question, but if you figure 365 days in a year, and I don't mean to imply I work 365 days a year, but I probably spend, because I come home most weekends, I probably spend about 40% of my time in Iowa and 60% in Washington. If you consider Monday through Friday as a work week, then I guess I'd spend about 40 to 42 weeks out of a year in Washington, or about 80% of the time in Washington and 20% of the time in Iowa. See, this is, you know, the Congress isn't run like a business, and I don't know whether Congress could run like a business, but just to show you how inconvenient it was, I was planning, all of us were planning on being in Washington this week and next week, and Senator Reid runs the United States Senate because he's the majority leader and the Democrats are in the majority, so he kind of decides when we're going to be in session, not be in session. So about 4 o'clock last Thursday, he said, we aren't going to meet this week and next week. Well, normally, if I knew I wasn't going to meet this week and next week, then what I tried to do, because you know I got a reputation for getting each one of the 99 counties every year since I've been in the Senate to hold a town meeting or to visit a high school or something like that. Normally, if I had a couple weeks to know that we weren't meeting this week and last week, I could schedule 4 or 5 town meetings every day. Now, when he said we weren't meeting, then what I had to do was, since I tried to visit about a dozen high schools every year, we called the high schools and said, would you like to have Senator Grassley come and visit with your students? So I go to Waverly today. I went to Monticello on Wednesday, and then I was invited to a Girl Scout thing that, when I said Wednesday, Monday I went to Monticello and a Girl Scout thing. Then I'm with you today and Grundy Center today. I'm going to be with Appleton and Parkersburg next week. I think next Tuesday or Wednesday I'll have a meeting in New Hampton. But here's the point of my doing. When they announce on a Thursday at 4 o'clock that you aren't going to meet the next 2 weeks, I can't make very efficient use of my time when I'm in Iowa, because I could have had, you know, easily four meetings in a day if I had 2 weeks to set them up. Does that answer your question? Mm-hmm. Okay, another question. Yes?
How closely does the Senate work with the executive branch?
I'm sorry, what?
How closely do you guys work with the executive branch?
Oh, well, sometimes too close and sometimes not close enough. If you want to look at it strictly from a mechanical point of view of how the Constitution's written, you know, we would do what we have to do under the Constitution. They do what they have to do under the Constitution. There be very little communication. Now, as a matter, after 225 years, there's a lot of interaction. I suppose I could answer your question several ways. How often do I talk to the President? Probably less than once a month. If you have a Republican president, like I'm a Republican, maybe more often than once a month. But let's just say once a month, on average. In the case of a lot of cabinet members, quite frequent. And if you include If you include letters that you communicate back and forth, or phone calls, then I suppose you communicate with the White House more often than once a month, because I was talking about face-to-face. We cabinet people, they come to the Hill to what we call hearings. So you're involved with them fairly regularly. But by letter, very frequently. Now I look at it this way. A senator, a member of Congress, I suppose he's got more than 2 jobs, but I like to, I think this takes care of most of our time. Passing laws or appropriating money. But under our checks and balances system of government, you don't just pass a bill and forget about it, or you don't just appropriate money and forget about it. You have a job of what I call oversight. You're a check on the executive branch of government. I'm sure you study that in government, checks and balances. You're a check. So I spend more of my time than on the first one, on the second one, going to make sure that our laws are faithfully executed. And you find a lot of money wasted that you can bring to the attention, and maybe once the money's spent, maybe you don't get it back, but you kind of let people know that somebody screwed up, or a law not being passed. You know, I don't know whether maybe your teachers could fill you in on the details, but you know, for a couple of years I've been working on this gun running thing of guns going to Mexico, and our government promoting the sale of guns, or illegal sale of guns to get them across the border. That's called Fast and Furious, was the name of the program. You know, can you believe that our own government, based upon the rule of law, would have people within the Justice Department saying that, you know, we ought to sell guns illegally, follow them across the border to the drug traffickers in Mexico, then you don't follow them, and one of the guns ends up the murder of a border patrol agent. Well, there's something wrong, isn't there? And you'd be surprised how difficult it was getting to the bottom of this. And I wouldn't say I'm to the bottom of it yet, but we've got some people fired. And I think you know, that's one of the things. Next question.
We just had an election, we spent a lot of time on the election this fall. So the question would be, like, you've been in Congress a few years, you've gone through a few elections. How has it changed from when you first started running for the House to now? I mean, with the money, or just, do you enjoy campaigning? Do you enjoy the process of running for office?
I don't hate campaigning, but I don't enjoy it as much as I do serving. And I don't mind campaigning except for the parts about, I think debates are the most difficult thing for me because I'm not a good debater. But outside of debates, I don't know whether there's a whole lot about campaigning I don't like. You get kind of tired of parades from time to time. But I think if I wanted to quantify the big difference, and maybe the big difference isn't illustrated so much by me as it might be better by other senators, but for instance, the first time I ran for office, I think we spent less than $2 million. And I think the last time I ran, I think I spent $6 or $7 million. And I think there's some people in Iowa can easily spend $10 million. That's a quantifiable answer to your question. I suppose something that we running for the Senate is not a big change yet, but it'll have to be a big change in the future, is greater use of social networking. That's a big factor in Obama's victory. And Republicans will have to catch up with that. Not just to elect a president, maybe even to elect lower level people. I think that that campaigns tend to be much more negative now. They've always been negative. In fact, you can go back to Thomas Jefferson and John Adams if you want dirty campaigns and whisper campaigns, but I think it's worse now, and obviously because of the media, it could be worse, and maybe not as easily identifiable and not able to police it as much. Do you have something else I could comment on about the campaign?
Well, no, it was just, the whole process, how it kind of consumes people, and then all the changes that are happening, and, we knew you weren't up for re-election this year, but you've been through it a little bit.
Yeah.
And just the changes, obviously, and like you said, becoming the social media,
Yeah.
so.
I've always adopted the policy though of campaigning. It's more important what you do the first 5 years of a campaign than the 6th year of a campaign. Because if you handle the first 5 years right, it makes the 6th year a lot easier. So, that's one of the reasons I try to get around the state on a regular basis. Is to be a good senator and to know what people want so you can represent them, but it also makes the 6th year a lot easier. In other words, people can't say, how come I only see you at election time? Yes.
What do you think the rider bills attached to